actually have to use the mic.
Yes.
Or do we just...
Wow, that's a super dad saving his son in a car. That's amazing, but it goes to show what underlines fatherhood. It has its dangers. Happy Father's Day to all of you. This is a Stanford Seed Transformation Network from Ghana event. The Stanford Seed Transformation Network is a network of participants who have completed the Stanford Seed Transformation Program. SEED is a Stanford Graduate School of Business-led initiative. Established in 2016, the global communities of SEED, of the Seed Transformation Program past participants, constitute the Stanford Seed Transformation Network. The network offers its members a way to harness the power of the global SEED community by connecting online, in-person, or at events, and with other like-minded businesses and leaders whose industries align. Currently, the global network has 800 plus members, and the Ghana chapter is 102 members. The network in Ghana has very diversified small and medium-scale companies spanning many sectors of the Ghanaian economy, including manufacturing, IT, education, healthcare, engineering, retail, real estate housing, business services, agriculture and fishing, food processing, communication, construction, mining, logistics, transportation, entertainment, hospitality, and tourism. Clearly, there's so many I have to read them. Boy. My name is Carl Richards, Chairman of African Concrete Products Limited and also Vice President of the Stanford Seed Transformation Network. I am a father of 2 children and your host for this program. You're all welcome to this maiden SSTN Ghana Father's Day program. We plan to share some of our fatherhood versus entrepreneurship experiences with you and hope you will enjoy spending your hour and a half with us. We'll take a commercial break, and when we return, I'll introduce the panels to you. We are all members of the Seed Transformation Network. Welcome back to the Stanford Seed Transformation Network's Father's Day discussion. We are here today, all members of the Stanford Seed Transformation Network, and I'd like to introduce the panel members. We have Mr. Kofi Owusu-Insua is the director of Insano Limited. He is married with 3 children. Kofi, I'm sure your experience as a young father will differ from all the others.
Certainly. Seems I have the youngest marriage here on this panel. I probably will end up asking a lot of the questions.
Yeah, okay. Well, as a business leader, I'm sure you also have a lot of experience to impart to us. Kofi, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Carl.
Okay. We also have Ihai Beniti, the CEO of Clear Space Labs, who is married with 2 children. I'd be very interested to see what your experience has been, Ihai.
I think it's a learning journey for all of us. Thanks for having me. It's a real joy to be here.
Thank you for coming. And we have Mr. John Adokufo. He's the CEO of the African Region Hotel, and John is married with 2 children. John, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Richard. It's an experience and it's a journey. At every stage, there's something new, there's a new challenge, and we continue to learn after so many years.
Okay. Well, what we're going to try to do here is to examine some of the dilemmas we face as fatherhood. I mean, with our fatherhood. It's a fairly informal gathering, and we're here as peers. So I'd like to do a little bit of digging. And the first place that I went was, I wanted to find out exactly what fatherhood, where it came from. Okay, and I wanted to find out, I'd made notes, and it said, are our rules as fathers God-given and dictated by natural laws, or does society determine who and what a father is? You see, motherhood is much more clear. A mother nurtures life even from before life as we know it begins, and the life that she nurtures on her is completely dependent on her until independent living. But as for fatherhood, when I looked it up, it said fatherhood is the state of being a father. Went further to say, a person enters fatherhood when they become a father, and this most commonly happens when their child is born. Gentlemen, I want to first find out do we agree with this? Because it sort of sets the stage. A mother is a mother from before the child is born, but a father is only a father after a child is born. I mean, what do we think? John, would you like to take a spin at that?
Certainly. Father is a person, usually in a family setting, who takes responsibility. The family looks up to the father to provide direction, to put food on the table, and also to provide, if you like, safety, security for the family. That is what society expects. That is what the mothers expect. That is what the children look for. But at the same time, in our social settings, a man in society is expected to provide guidance, to mentor, and to lead the way, not just for the nuclear family, but for the extended family, and for other people who may not be so lucky to have guardians. So fatherhood in our societal context is much broader than the narrow definition that we are becoming used to. Because let's not forget, maybe 2 or 3 generations ago, fatherhood as defined by a traditional setting was very different. In the Ghanaian setting, a father was probably more of an uncle who looked after his nieces and nephews. But of course, we've moved on. Culture is dynamic, and fatherhood is taking on different dimensions and different meanings. So fatherhood is very broad. That's what I'll say.
Yes.
Well, I think to sort of add to that, I like what you said, John. I think it's a role. It's a role you play, and that role is dependent on who you're playing it with. So you're playing the role against your biological kids, or a broader scope in society, and you're expected to provide direction, to set order, to provide provision, and to provide the safety for the family. And whether that's your nuclear family or broader than that, I think it's a role you're playing. It's a leadership role.
Fantastic.
Okay, maybe I just add just a quick point to that, and I agree with what he said. Certainly, it's a role. I also think fatherhood is a state of mind. Okay, to the extent that if you have the mindset to nurture, to provide counsel, to provide guidance to anybody who is willing, or anybody who is ready, or anybody who seeks to solicit such advice and guidance, etc., from you, you assume fatherhood. So I don't think, for example, that you become a father only after the child is born. I think to a very large extent, we see that from the various religions of the world, with God himself, and from the good book, from the Bible, God's fatherhood and how God assumes fatherhood. He is our father today, probably not because he biologically gave birth to us, but he has a certain responsibility. He provides guidance and direction, etc., etc. And I find this across the fabric of almost every other religion. There is a certain deity who takes responsibility for people. So I suppose it's a state of mind. Once you are in the position to provide such guidance, you become a father.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, these are very good observations. I'd like to move it along because there's a certain commonality. I've heard that the father's a leader, and that sort of came through. Now we run our businesses, so we know that there are different aspects of leaderships and different meanings of leadership. Now, when we come home, where we are discussing fatherhood, are we the leader in the sense that a lot of people think about? I mean, who sets the stage in our various homes? I mean, this is an area that I think Mr. Beniti, you should give us some.
So I think the first thing about leadership in the home is that unlike at work, you can't fire anybody. Okay, so you need a totally different skill set and dynamic, and it's more of an adaptive, nurturing, grooming, mentoring style of leadership. So it's very different set of parameters, and the outcomes are also yours to bear completely. So depending on how you manage or run or keep your home, the outcomes you have are entirely, again, your responsibility. So slightly different. We like to think of our workspaces as families, but I think they're more like sports teams than they are like families, where you find the best players, you put them in positions they can perform, and you groom them. But at home, it's very different. You don't have that choice. You can't say, okay, you know, this kid, let's put him on the bench and bring this one on board. It doesn't work. So a totally different leadership dynamic is required.
Yeah.
For the home.
So if we drill down, Kofi, we drill down based on that, and we say that, you know, you go home and there's a dynamic because you want to institute something. Do you just do it the way you do it at work? You come in and then you give some instruction, or you tell your partner what you want and then it's going to happen?
Well, Carl, even at work, it's always consensus, right?
Has to be consensus.
You have to get people to understand the direction. I think the most important role I play at work is culture. I shape culture. Culture, if you like, gives you identity. So my biggest role in the workplace is creating a certain culture of how we behave, how we respond to partners, we respond to clients, the kind of respect we are called to one another. And that is not very different from what you do at home. And like he rightly said, certainly you can't fire anybody because they went against the established culture. I suppose what you do more rough at home is to keep reinforcing the culture. What I also find interesting is that at home, slightly different from what I would typically do at work, at home, the kids are watching. They're watching you. It has very little to do with what you say. So the culture, you would have to walk the talk yourself. I would have to model, the culture in front of them to be able to shape the identity. So I suppose that would be the difference between how I lead at work and how I would typically lead at home. But again, it's consensus everywhere in both places.
Thank you. And so, taking all that into consideration, John, I'm going to come down on you a little bit here. So that there, as a father and entrepreneur, okay, how do you think your life has changed most since becoming a father?
Well, as a father first, and then an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Well, in the setting at home, you have to listen, because what you're trying to do is set an agenda which will pan out over several years, and you need the active cooperation, buy-in of your wife. And whilst doing that, and as the kids come along and grow, you need to sort of keep revisiting the objective and how it's actually working out. Being an entrepreneur is entirely different. You have an idea, you find the right people, you try and map a route. Like he said, you hire and fire. You seek advice from certain quarters, but you make that decision yourself ultimately. So there's a contrast. And at home, it's very important that there's buy-in. There's a need to make, especially your wife, feel confident, loved, listened to. And, the conflict with all of that and being an entrepreneur is that you're sacrificing for both. You want the best for your family, you want to provide, you want to achieve in terms of your workspace, deliver the goods, which ultimately your family will benefit from, but your family also needs attention badly. So it's a matter of striking that right balance, and that, I think, is always the challenge.
I've heard a very interesting word, sacrifice. Sacrifice. This is the type of thing, but I'm being waved that we have to go on a commercial break. So when we get back from the commercial break, we're going to deal with the sacrifices we have to make, the challenges. This thing distracts me. Go to TV. Okay, dilemmas usually involve trying to decide between things that have unfortunate circumstances, regardless of which way you go. And we last left off with a marvelous word called sacrifice. I would like to drill down to see what type of sacrifice, what are our challenges? What sacrifices do we make? I mean, I'll take a poke and I'll say, you know, you're there and you're trying to instill maybe moral values, or you're playing tough dad, whatever it is, and you have to go in and be the bad guy. So can you tell us some experiences or what some major challenges may have been? I'm going to give you a break, John. I'm going to go back to Ehai. Let him come back.
Wow, sacrifices. So I'd like to sort of take that from the angle of the conflict between so I think that as a dad, as a father, you have a responsibility for security and safety of the home. And sometimes that comes into sharp contrast with your job as an entrepreneur, which is the very nature of entrepreneurship is risk. And so you find yourself in a situation where you're taking risk, you're taking high levels of risk to create something beautiful in the future. But what that means is that many times there will be no money at home, and there's a very real risk that you put what should really go to the home or the family gets pumped into the business at the early stages, and that's like major sacrifice. So how do you get the buy-in of everyone at home to think that this sacrifice will be worth it? And there are no eternal sacrifices. The sacrifices always have a time period. So year one, it's like the thing is going, okay, we're happy, well, we can deal with it. Year two, year three, year four, year five, it's like, look, honey, come, let's have a conversation about this. I don't know if you're really cut out to be an entrepreneur. Maybe you should go and find a job at one of the bigger firms. So that's, I think there's always that tension between the safety and security of a certain type of employment and the risk and the rewards potentially that entrepreneurs. When it works out well, it's very different. That journey comes with its own challenges.
Yes. I know that I've had the challenge because my family lives in Tampa, and I've had
in the U.S.
In the U.S., I've had a separation since 2013, and I fortunately, unfortunately, with regards to the family, have all my investments and life here, but due to circumstances beyond our control, they have to be there at the moment, and it's very difficult to explain to my family that, well, what would I do in the United States, so to speak, at the moment. But we're solving it, and there will be, as you said, at the end, I'm an entrepreneur, and we'll find a way. But it's a sacrifice that the family is going through. It's a sacrifice that I'm going through, you know. And we don't know what the answer will be at the end of the day, you know. So there are some things that there are no easy answers, you know. So I mean, I throw that out there to show that, yeah, it's not as bad as yours, Kofi.
No, certainly not. No, so, you know, and again, like he mentioned, I see that in contemporary times, a lot of the sacrifices we make usually point to the area of health. So the stress levels are very high if you want to play in the very competitive fields, where essentially you'll be able to get a lot more reward if the risk pays off. So you have a very, you know, large number of young people risking a lot of things to be able to put family together, to be able to make ends meet, to be able to get the family to be comfortable. A lot of young guys today are looking for gated communities. They are trying to ward off robberies and so on and so forth. And for you to be able to afford these things, it comes with a lot of risk to health. But again, this is very common, and this is a very usual area of sacrifice that we make. But you know, Carl, there's a very interesting kind of sacrifice that I have to make if I have to discipline my children. At times, when they are crying, I get broken within. If they start crying, again, like I said from the get-go, I probably have the youngest family here. When you see an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old cry because they use a certain word, and you have to discipline them, and you have to be able to point out to them that I'm taking you through this process, or you are on a timeout because you did X, Y, and Z, and so I will deny you play time, or I will deny you TV time. And they are so sad. And you, the parent, you stand back and you wish you could excuse them from the punishment. But you'd have to put them through that.
Tough love.
Yes, absolutely. Tough love. And you get broken within. But you know it's for the benefit of the child. And so this is also a lot of sacrifice that we have to make, especially where we are fresh fathers, and let's say you're a father of one, and you have to go through this process, or you have an adopted child, or you have someone you're taking care of, and yet you'd have to deny them as a matter of discipline. I think it's a lot of sacrifice to be able to put up with that sort of disposition.
Ekovi is not going to end when they're young. It continues.
I know, right?
It continues. Yeah, there's tough love. I think also moral issues that have to be passed along, disciplinary issues, are always the most difficult, particularly in these days when our social standards are changing. You know, expectations are what the youth do, the expectations that they have. It's very difficult to provide guidance when you are older, because you don't have the I would say the background or the platform. I mean, when you're young, you probably have that, but
social currency.
Yes. I mean, I don't know how you've been handling that, John. Is there serious challenges there?
Yeah, there are serious challenges, but the challenges, like I was saying earlier, change as the family grows.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, as fathers, you know that every child is different, and every child has different demands on the father. For instance, I would find that my son was very okay with reading and going to bed while I was away working. My daughter would wait until I get home, even if it was 10 or 11. And I'm talking about when she was literally 3-4 years old, and demand time with me alone before going to bed. So that is a sacrifice. You know, the children are sacrificed. The time with the children is sacrificed, and that is serious. That might affect them positively or adversely, depending on their character as they grow up. And as you rightly pointed out, as they grow, you face different challenges. You know, they have to make choices. They are heavily influenced by social media. They get into all sorts of groups. They have influences which we didn't have as kids. I mean, when we were kids, you were sort of told what to do and you didn't answer back, even if you were thinking differently. They actually want to have a debate. And they want to tell you how it is, and they want to sort of move in their own direction. So this again comes back to what we talked about earlier. You're not only in a situation where you're to seek consensus with your wife, who probably remotely is the head of the house.
Well, this is what I was trying to get earlier. Who sets the rules?
You're also, after a while, trying to seek consensus with these youngsters. And as society changes, as culture changes, fatherhood and the dynamic of fatherhood also changes. And the father has to be conscious of these changes and adapt. The issue is, seeing as there's no roadmap, seeing as it's a new experience, how do you navigate? How do you succeed? And failure could also be disastrous, because failure could be that you fail to direct the child properly and they take a wrong turn, and the process of that wrong turn and whatever happens comes back to you as the father to haunt you. I mean, when the discussion is going on, it's for everybody to talk, right? And it's for the father to listen. When there's a problem, everybody looks at you.
Yes.
And you've got to pick up the pieces.
Yes.
And of course, at that point, your managing director, who is your wife, will turn around, may cry and look at you and blame you for not giving appropriate direction. So it's complex.
So let's drill down on that a little bit as to how do you handle conflict resolution in your home?
So I'd love to respond to that with there's a scripture which strikes at the core of that, and I'd like to read it to you. It's in Psalm 78:72, and it says, "So he shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them with skillful hands." It's a skill. This is the thing. It's a negotiation, and you find that you get better at it. My wife often says, "Don't raise your voice, improve your argument."
That's good advice, though.
Yes, don't raise your voice, improve your argument.
Yeah.
So when you're getting agitated that nobody sees things the way you see them, then you're not communicating effectively. You need to dial it down and then improve your skill, improve the quality of your skill, your ability to nurture, to shepherd, to put things in perspective, to be strong when you need to take a good decision when you need to. But ultimately, it's your responsibility. That's, I think, is the first thing to accept. And to manage that conflict, I think to be a good listener, a skill which I'm still learning. And just, I think it's a negotiation. It's something you grow into, and hopefully you get better as the years go by, and hopefully you listen to a few wiser fathers around you who you can tap into their wisdom and see how they've navigated.
Well, I'll tell you, throughout the ages, a lot of children have been born, and we are still trying to find out what to do. But what you said about listening is very important. I've always found that when you have a child who is strong and has a lot of potential, sometimes you find that as a parent, whatever you tell them not to do is what they want to do. When you want to advise, how do you advise a child who says they want to do exactly what you don't want them to do? Okay, I'll break the ice here. I mean, I've had a personal experience. My son grew up appearing to never like a day of school in his life. He was always very difficult to go to school. One morning, it got really bad. My wife came to me and said, he's just not going to go to school today. And she was a teacher. She had to leave, and I should go and talk to him. And when I went to him, I said to him, I said, everybody has bad days. So let's make a deal. Any school term, you can have 2 days where you just don't go to school because you don't want to go to school. And if you want today to be one of those days, then fine, don't go to school today. So he promptly got dressed. Today wasn't going to be that day. And he went to school, and he never took a day off school.
That's a good one.
Great skill.
So you find that there are times you have to, like you said, negotiate. You find the flexible ground, and things might move in the direction that you want to move. And these are things that I think that are also there. I don't know if you have any.
I mean, Carl, yeah, great point. I mean, I'm very happy about the example you just gave. Again, if the kids are as young as mine, carrot and stick, basically, it works. The other thing about conflict resolution is what have found to be the most intractable challenges that we've had in our very young marriage are wrong expectations or expectations that were not communicated, even between you, the parent, and the child, or between the spouse, the parents. If you don't communicate expectations, then it sets out the breeding ground for a lot of these conflicts, and the conflicts really never get resolved because we keep going around in circles, because I'm really not getting the point you're communicating, because I had no idea of what your expectations were. I think that we have pivoted from having unwritten expectations or expectations that were not discussed to rather coming to having agreements like what you just had with your son. And so if this is the outcome I am expecting, I communicate it to the child. I communicate it to my wife. And I see that it has reduced at least by more than perhaps 60, 70% the conflicts that we'll typically have at home. Again,
That's great.
Again, it comes back to communication. If we don't communicate clearly, and then we resort to screaming and shouting and body language and so on and so forth, then we have a lot of challenges, and then challenges are never resolved, really.
Yes. So we have situations where you have failures and we have successes. And I talked about a success. We all like to talk about our successes, but sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, we have a lot of families and fathers in which these things don't work. And when we come back from the commercial break, I think we will take a look at that. Okay. Well, welcome back. Gentlemen, we would also provide some advice, I think. When we talk about failures, people make sacrifices. And there's a lot of fathers that it doesn't work. They end up either sometimes leaving, sometimes abandoning. And I wanted to take a look at some of the reasons for that. Okay, and how to manage it. Particularly, I think a lot of a big stress point is always income generation. Income it seems to be never enough. I mean, as we know that as entrepreneurs. So, how do we handle the expectations that are surrounding income generation and expectation? And you would, everyone wants their child to go to Harvard, and everybody needs to drive a Benz and that type of thing. And sometimes the expectations are very, very high. How have we handled it? Sometimes there's some practicality, but any words of wisdom, John?
Yes, certainly the expectations must be communicated right up front. Right up front. Which schools you want your kids to attend? Where do you want to live? How do you expect kids to progress? What do you want for yourselves individually? And there's an inherent conflict. You're starting a business. You're putting every last penny you have into that business, and yet you want the kids to get the best foundation, the best primary school education. So it's incumbent upon the father to make sure, because the mother is going to demand this, to make sure that the kids can be well treated. I think beyond that, there's got to be a compromise. Because success, when it comes, will inure to the benefit of the entire family. So it's about striking a balance, it's about communication, it's about cutting a deal. I wouldn't talk about failures. I think it's about compromise. There's got to be a bit of give and take. There's got to be a bit of understanding. And if you can strike the right balance, I think in the long term, whatever it is that is desired, as compared to the targets that you originally set, probably will be met. But, when you're growing a family, there's nervousness. Mother's got the first child. She wants the best creche. She wants the best nursery. She wants the best primary school, because she is competing. I mean, she's looking for that good start. She's fighting for that security for her kids, because these kids are an extension of her. I mean, this is what she has. I mean, you're thinking about your business, but for her, the investment is the child. Of course, she thinks of her husband, and she wants the husband to succeed, and she knows that she will get that Benz or Range Rover or whatever it is that she desires from the success that the husband comes. Yes, when it comes.
When it comes.
Yeah.
But while she's waiting for it to come, she needs the basics. And I think it's incumbent on the man to actually have it as part of the plan to succeed. I mean, I left or took a sabbatical of a very good job with PricewaterhouseCoopers to start my business. 2 years, no pay. But before I did that, I had saved enough to at least pay for the kids' school fees. The occasional holiday or whatever extra was a bit of a struggle. But what I also find is that sometimes you've just got to listen to your wife. It's worth losing a few battles.
Yeah, the intuition.
It's just so you can have some peace of mind.
I tell you, behind every successful man,
it's worth losing one or two battles so that you can have your peace of mind to move on. Because the lack of that peace of mind, the lack of that little bit of space could also break the man. The stress of actually starting the business, opening on day one, going through the first year, maybe the first 2-3 years, not sleeping enough, not showing up at home early enough to do the homework. Kids sometimes making demands. Why didn't you come to my sports day? This and that and the other. You didn't come and see my teacher. The wife making the snide comment about so you can never show up at 6 when the demands are that you have to stay till 10.
Absolutely.
But that's what the man is for. You're carrying the wife on your back, and she's carrying the kids on her back, and slowly you're being crushed. And this continues for 20, 25 years.
I see a lot of agreements.
I remember when I started. So I think I was lucky in the sense that I started my first business in my third year of university. Right. So Rancard was started in my third year of university, and I started my business in my third year of university. And by the time I was getting married, my wife met me at a point where, when I'd go to work in the morning, if she didn't come and pick me up, I couldn't get home. There was nothing in the pocket. There was great hope and ambition for the future, but there wasn't much else. And I salute her courage, because when I look back at myself at the time, I really would have had questions about the safety of both of us on that journey. I think that one of the things that needs to happen is the agreement on the thresholds. Okay, what is acceptable sacrifice, and for how long? And I think that success is the safety of everyone on the journey. Nobody gets left behind. So how we navigate that. Now, John said something very interesting. I think he said something about birthing your business. Your business is your child. Your wife has children for you. So now you have 2 kids.
Ooh, dangerous.
You have one child, which is your business, which needs the nurturing, the time, the attention, the money. And then you also have a family, which also needs the same thing. And suddenly you're having to navigate and negotiate how much you're putting here and how much you're putting there, and managing that journey as you go along.
One of the big things that we always hear when it comes to challenges of fatherhood is setting priorities.
Exactly.
Time management.
So once the kids come in, then you need to make some adjustments. And you also need to both set the values and set the boundaries. So I told my kids at a certain point that, listen, guys, we're not going for holiday anywhere. If we have to go to a holiday, we'll find somewhere nice in Ghana and go and do holiday, because Daddy is working on a project right now, and all of us need to support Daddy in working on this project. And when it's done, I promise you we will take vacation. So they kept checking in. Hey, Dad, how's it going? Where are we on the project? No, is it going to be finished this year? Yeah, Daddy's on the job. Okay, how's it going? But we all have a shared stake in it. So I think that negotiation, again, I think is very important. And the success is our ability to create a safe environment where we can take everybody along, even when there are difficult sacrifices. Look, people with far more money than us have had challenges with managing and keeping families together.
Fantastic.
If
Thank
I
you.
can just add to that, it's not about money.
No, it's not.
I mean, that's what you ultimately find out.
Yes.
Yes, you make the money, the family benefits from the money, but the family requires bonding, it requires time, it requires love. That's what is important there. You make the money, the family benefits from it. You run the business, you grow it. The family benefits from it. Ultimately, you hope that one of the kids might be interested in the business, but even that is a maybe.
I'm going to pick on a word that you just said. We're going to take a commercial break. Okay, we don't have to take a commercial break because the word you said was a big word. You said love. And I wanted to find out and this will be a good one for you, Kofi, is that what happens to romance along the way? Because the tally always says that romance suffers. Is that true?
Carl, I think it's a big question you're asking me to deal with. I'm not sure how to tackle it. I certainly know that I am most probably not the most romantic person, but again, it's a very relative conversation. I think what's important, and I think both John and Ehi have dealt with it adequately, is that we manage expectations and we pace ourselves as to what is important in the marriage. I find that in my marriage, what my wife wants the most is conversation, more than romance, more than any flowery, more than
romantic.
any red
a
carpet.
Conversation is romantic.
What she appreciates the most is when I turn off my phone when I get home,
Fantastic.
which rarely happens by the nature of the work we do. But I think it's important. So we deliberately make time. We delineate time for those conversations. And at times we find ourselves talking into the wee hours of the day. So we talk to the point where we realize, okay, it's 2 a.m. Or okay, wait, we've discussed this thing for over 3 hours. Can we take a break? Can we maybe go to?
But that's fantastic. And
Again,
you said that you don't have romance.
Well, if you mention romance, and in the very common definition we give to romance, then there's supposed to be a certain candlelight, and there's supposed to be a certain red carpet, and there's supposed to be all those flowery stuff that we typically associate with.
Yeah,
with
do
this.
you agree? Yeah.
I agree. I think that the highest form of intimacy is communication.
Yeah.
And when you can build that, I think that the role of an entrepreneur can be extremely lonely. And what you want to build is companionship, and I think that's the romance. It's having somebody there on the journey with you. You can talk about your highs,
I agree 100%.
your lows.
I think Kofi is so lucky he doesn't even know what he has.
You know, it does help that you would make time to take your wife out to a nice dinner, but I think more than anything else is to time.
If you can do that, because the other item that usually suffers, and it becomes a challenge, is the me time, the time for yourself, because you're trying to do things at home, pressurized at work. I know. I always wanted to learn how to play golf, and I always wanted to play golf, but I looked at it and I just said to myself, I mean, can I go out and play golf 4 hours, 5 hours at a time? And I decided as a decision that I wasn't going to do that. I still want to play golf, and I hope that when I finally grown up and I'm fully successful, I'll be playing golf. You know, so you have that as well. That what do you do for recreation? You take your family out. I mean, and you have that interaction with them. John.
It's I think probably one of the most important things, because if you at any time break down, get ill, crash out, whatever you like to call it, then it becomes a burden for the family. It's a disaster. And I think it's something that most entrepreneurs are not too mindful of. You know, you can become almost obsessive about work and this new baby that you've created, which the family may benefit from, but may not be that critical in the long term.
Changing goalposts.
Exactly. I mean, you started an IT business. You know, you've grown a son or a daughter who might be doing IT, but would probably look at what you're doing and just think, this is old school. I don't want to have any part of it. I'm not going to come back to it. So all the business provides ultimately is your self-actualization and some money for the family.
That's a very, very...
If you're not careful and you go down, you've created
both ways.
Havoc for the family. And it's key that as entrepreneurs we learn, yes, when you start you've got to work in the business, But I think after a while, you've got to work on the business. You've got to find a way of separating yourself from the business. You've got to find a way of being in the family. Otherwise, over time, the family leaves you behind. Mother bonds with kids. Kids form an impression that you are remote.
You're absent.
Yeah. They know you're providing. They come to you, but they still believe you're remote. You're not present. And I think that is also disastrous.
Yes.
So even if mom does nothing else but take the money and use it on the kids, she spends time with them. So the kids begin to believe that mom is everything. Dad, well, he's fiddling with his toys in that office somewhere. He's not really a part of us.
It's not a wonder then that Mother's Day always has this prominence.
Chicken.
That Father's Day will never attain.
No, actually, I think it's getting fathers are slowly getting back in. But
Yeah.
I think it's an important point you bring up. The dynamic is changing. You have ministry for women and girl child. You go to any prize given day, the girls get all the prizes. If you go to any university, the best students in engineering are girls, medicine girls, the law the girls, social sciences, etc. the girls. And I don't know what it means for our society in the future, but I think it's going to create a problem.
Yeah.
So, there are several factors to consider, and I think we should all be very, very mindful of the roles we play as fathers in the family and the roles we play
John,
as
what you say is
entrepreneurs.
powerful. And what I'm gleaning from what you're saying essentially is that we should be more focused and deliberate about creating memories, right? Spending time with the children, spending time with the spouse. That's what matters. That's what will live after you're gone, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just for the entrepreneurs. I think it's just the pressures of modern society and the role of the father trying to sort of create the safety, putting food on the table, giving the opportunities in the family. And we should find a way of sidestepping that pressure. I don't know how. I haven't got an answer for that. I'm not so sure that I've been particularly successful.
I suppose it's a journey. So we are working towards
Absolutely.
to attain that.
Spectrum.
Yes.
Working somewhere on that spectrum.
Yes,
It's work in progress.
Work in progress.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to take a small commercial break and see what our sponsors have to say. Okay, we're back, and looks like we have a certain degree of popularity. We have quite a few questions from people who are watching us and people who are engaged, and so I'm going to actually cater to them and ask one or two questions, and we can decide to answer them. First question was, who is a father And what do you enjoy the most about being a father? So, yes, I mean.
So let me attempt it. I think we've sort of answered it already in the introduction of the program. I think we mentioned that anybody who provides care, protection, etc., or like I'd like to look at it, anyone with a mindset to provide protection and counsel and so on, and take on the responsibility of the provision of these necessities of life, assume the role of a father. For me, what I love the most about fatherhood, as I've come to realize these few years, is how impactful my role is in shaping the lives of the children that we've been blessed to have. I see them pick up a certain technical speak, a certain lingo, a certain way of doing things, teaching them how to use a cutlery. I find it exciting when you see them walking in your steps. I typically have a certain expression when I get home very late, and I see that my son gets home and he's trying to say that sort of thing. You can see there's a certain force of character. There's a certain force of the model that you are building for them, that they want to, essentially follow. So I find that very exciting, and I feel that if we get it right as fathers, we could correct the ills of the next generation, and the failings of our generation will not, have a devastating effect on the next generation. I find that to be a very exciting benefit of fatherhood, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, that's a good youthful, interesting perspective. John, would you have a comment there?
Yes, I think what I'm going to say is an extension of what Kofi has already said. I guess I'm further down the line. So we've been through those steps. We've come through. Some have finished university and have started working. Others are just about finishing. And I think what is most impressive is when you tend to your son and you talk about a certain aspect of business or life, and they've got a point of view. And they can actually tell you that, well, if you do X and Y, this is likely to be the result. And they're convincing, and you probably realize that they are quite sharp. It's just surprising because you remember them, how young they were, and you remember the first day they cried in your house and how they were helpless, and you see them come through, and they've sort of come into their own. And you've got to accept that now they are, if you like, another man in their own right, and probably can even do better than you. So I think I enjoy that.
I can imagine that the ultimate experience would be when they take over the business completely and you are sitting at home.
Yeah, but I think I said something earlier. You realize that they're so fast and so far removed from what you're doing that what you're doing they may not find it interesting, but if they can get something out of it, whether it's capital or whatever else, and move on to whatever they would like to do, I think that is success in its own right.
Yes. I think, I have an indirect experience because I think during the COVID time, when businesses went down a little bit, I have some associates who actually terminated most of their staff and hired their children and their children's friends and got about 500% better performance out of just having them working on it, and then they never went back to employing from outside again.
Wow.
So and you say that we may correct the ills. I think that's very, very important. Well, let me take another question. As a father and an entrepreneur, how are you able to balance work and family duties? Yeah.
Work in progress. Work in progress. I think the being deliberate and intentional. So, for example, I travel a lot. I have a ridiculous travel calendar, and but I have to make time to have calls with my daughters. So I just like I put everything else in my calendar, I make time so that we're talking all the time. They catch up on their homework, catch up on their projects, catch up on their friends. They learn about my projects, what I'm doing. They offer some input. So they're real stakeholders. I think for me the key is to make them stakeholders, important stakeholders in my life and my entrepreneurial journey, and just plan it. Be very deliberate and intentional about it. So struggling, but trying to find the balance.
There was a follow-up question on that, which I think I'll just tag it on right away. It says, after being away on business or just working long hours, what is your best way to reconnect with family?
So in my house, we have a tradition of ice cream. And when I show up and I arrive, well, this is because I travel quite a bit. So when I'm out of town, I come back home, I have to make time for the ice cream. So the girls want to go out and...
so viewers, you have it. It's about ice cream.
It's about ice cream.
It's magical.
Carl, I think there's something that he mentioned that I probably would want to tag along and then add a point to it. I think it's important to create spaces and boundaries, okay? So several times you would go to work and there's a particular form of pressure and a very challenging situation that's eating you up. Again, those of us with very young families, you get home and then the child is bubbly and excited to see you. And at that point, you need to be able to shelve that issue somewhere. Create the necessary boundary, okay, and deal with the child so the child doesn't feel your countenance is different or you are behaving differently. And again, your spouse, you are father to, and many times you realize that you are not only father to the children, but you're also father to the woman to a certain extent, because you end up providing direction, etc. And you allow for the particular challenge that you are dealing with, perhaps on a business trip, you get into town, perhaps your luggage didn't come back, or the deal for which you were going to close couldn't happen, you've lost so much money, and so on. So case in point, so I had this experience the other day, this is about 7 years ago. We're on the brink of, selling a part of the business. Right from the get-go, I realized it was a bad deal. And there was very little we could do because we needed the resources coming in and so on and so forth. Now, this whole process spanned about a month. I grew very lean in that whole period. I remember there were times I would come home and I would literally sleep with my shoes on. Just throw myself to the bed because it was a very frustrating period. Very stressful period. We had our first child. The family was still very young. I'd just gotten married, and I realized at a point after about 2 weeks of this process, I realized it was actually tearing the family apart. Essentially, I did not want to have any other form of conversation because I was losing the business I had spent years to build, and so I wasn't ready for comics. I wasn't ready for any other type of conversation. I barely have time to eat, and so on. I'll be speaking to lawyers. I get home. At times, I get home, drive into the car park, and I'm on the phone for a number of hours before I finally get in. I guess what helped me was, again, through counsel, we realized that it was important to separate these matters and to make sure that you don't bring work home. And again, it is one of the things that I feel is destroying a lot of father-child relationship, because you're dealing with a lot of very heavyweight issues, okay? And the child is helpless. The child wants just your time, and the child wants your cheerful countenance. So I think it's important, again, to stress on what Ehi said, that we create the necessary boundaries and we don't bring work home and so on, no matter how busy it gets. I think it's a skill we must master as entrepreneurs.
Kofi, I'm going to touch on something here. You said that you had some counsel to help. And I'm touching on it because these are some of the things that we don't know, that sometimes we have to get help. Okay, recently, for the types of stresses that I have in my family, we have to get counsel. We have to be able to sit with a third party, a professional, who may be able to look at our situation and provide an objective view. And sometimes we have a stigma in our society that says that we shouldn't be getting counsel. Okay, and I think it's important for our participants to know that these are things that you have serious issues, serious stresses, and these are things that you need. Sometimes, if you need help, don't be afraid to go for the help. I thank you very much for that.
The Bible says it, in a multitude of counselors, there is safety.
There's safety.
Yes.
So, I mean, you would have to talk. I'm lucky to have a lot of people around me I can easily go to. I certainly can come to you, Carl, anytime.
I think it's great, but I'd like to tag on that and just touch about something which has changed the work-home dynamic in the last 3 years, and it's work from home, especially since COVID. So these days I find that when I'm in Accra, I try to spend at least 2 days working from home because I've been away for a while and I don't want to go into the office. I want to spend time with the family. And I think that dynamic also brings in something. I think it's very helpful in building the bonding. In my home office, all three of us share an office. So my two daughters and I all sit across the table.
Fantastic.
And sometimes my daughter would tell me, "Daddy, pipe down. You're yelling. Okay, take it easy. Don't be so." So I think that brings in something else, and this is a newer trend we're seeing. It's not something which I think our parents had to deal with or even had the opportunity for, but I think it also creates a new opportunity for introducing a certain type of work-life balance because you're now working from home.
It's interesting. Depending on what you're doing, and depending on the character you are, and also what the characters in your family are, it may or may not work. I find it a little odd, even though I accept that that is what we've come to. And I think human interaction is very important, especially when it comes to work, especially for the young ones. Somebody who is not a master at what they're doing needs to work for a master to grow the skill set. But it's the reality of these times is that yes, we have that opportunity to, if you like, be in the home setting and to work together. What I was going to talk about was more to do with what Kofi said. When there's a crunch, you're walking a tightrope, and what you've been working on for maybe, in your case, 7 years, 10 years, you're not quite sure whether it's going up or going down, and it's whether you can find the support systems to help you. I mean, the business going down is not necessarily a bad thing. It may not feel good, but it's not necessarily about it. It could be an opening to something even better because you've acquired a whole set of skills which you could use in another sphere. But it's a stressful and difficult moment, traumatic to let go. And I think that is part of what entrepreneurs usually don't talk about. It's what they don't say, and it's what people don't understand. If you're working in a job, it's easy to go out and get a new job. Well, not easy, but you can walk into a new job with this. It's an easier route. But if you've built a business which may or may not have value. I think it's extremely stressful, and it's not everybody who can survive that either. So psychologically, it's I think it's one of the stress points for any entrepreneur, and most people, and I'm not just talking about the wife or the kids, just cannot appreciate the stress that such a situation can bring on. So it's one of the things that we don't say. I mean, many men cry, but nobody understands why they are crying.
Yeah.
Especially if they might even walk away with some money. They can't. You have to be an entrepreneur to appreciate that it's a crisis of confidence, which may lead to more negative consequences. So, it's one of the things, the sacrifices that entrepreneurs are bound at one point or another to face. So that's a stress point for us.
Yes. No, these are, I think, fantastic contributions and good learning points. I'm going to pick another question so we can squeeze it into the time. How do you manage the influence of global culture and technology as opposed to Ghanaian culture? And how are you to strike a balance?
There's an interesting phenomenon in my house. So all my kids were born in Ghana, except for occasional vacations, which are very short periods. They've schooled in Ghana, and yet all my kids have a certain accent. and at times, not just the accent, but also a certain cartoonish way of speaking. That's because while we are parenting, YouTube is also parenting.
Yes.
And so this afternoon, I walked into one of the halls, and they were watching, like my kids were watching this thing on YouTube. They will bring the animal and they'll ask you which animal this is, and there are about maybe 60 plus types of animals. So they will bring a skunk, for example, and a child is supposed to tell this is a skunk as opposed to a porcupine, or as opposed to and these animals are almost identical. Now, to my dismay, they could almost accurately tell the difference between a leopard and a tiger and an octopus. And all those varying species that have identical imagery.
Yeah.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that technology plays a very important role because it broadens their scope, it broadens their horizon. The stuff that they know today, I certainly didn't know, even when I was in my teenage.
Yeah.
And yet, it also introduces a lot of challenges because they learn all sorts of things. A child is singing the song, and I'm asking, "Hey, do you understand the lyrics of the song you're speaking?" And I'm almost livid. I'm getting very disturbed because, without any attention to what they are saying. So I think it's a very difficult balance. And so what we have decided to do is to make sure if we haven't watched it as parents, we don't allow them to watch it. If I have not perhaps asked my assistant to take a look at the content, I don't make them watch it. Again, this is a very, very little effort in a myriad of challenges, with technology. And the sort of things that they like these days. Just before the conversation started in the room, we're just talking about the sort of aspirations that they have these days and the sort of professions that they aspire to. If you're not careful, you will hit your head against the wall. If you hear the sort of things that they want to do after you've paid for all those years of education. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah. So we have in my house, we have a negotiation regarding media. Whatsoever is good, whatsoever is pure, whatsoever is of good report, think on these things. And this is the conversation. So as much as it's practical, you be your own judge. And the consequences though of if I find you talking about or watching something which doesn't meet this criteria, these standards, is quite devastating. So we've taught the values. This is what you're allowed to watch. And if you come up against something which clearly does not meet those standards, please censor yourself first. We do have and have tried to put in place a few measures, practical. So my younger daughter, for example, no, you cannot have a smartphone. You can have a regular phone. You can call daddy, great, but you are not going to go online unsupervised. The older one, yes, you can go online, but these are clearly the boundaries. And if any of these are violated, drastic action, no internet, no this, no, offline. And after a few examples, I think we've all come to appreciate the standards. I think also it's important to create safety so that we can have the conversations. If I think my kids feel safe enough to come and say, Daddy, this is what, I am exploring. Like one day my daughter came to me and said she wanted to be a model. And I said, okay, let's have a conversation about it, and what that means, and what type of attention you want to attract. And I think that it's important to keep a door open. I think culturally technology plays an important role. My daughter taught herself to play the piano by watching on YouTube, and taught herself to program by watching on the internet. And one of my daughters likes cooking, so she learned that from not just watching mommy, but so I think it's a double-edged sword. And as with all things, the responsibility of parenting is to provide that structure and the order and the safety and the rules of engagement.
I think what I hear too is a lot of parenting. Go ahead, John.
Exactly. I think he said it all. You've got to instill a value system, which, by the way, isn't easy. Like Kofi said earlier, you've got to walk the talk. They've got to understand what you mean. It's not just about saying it. And it's got to start early. I can tell you about a conversation that I had with my daughter's teachers when she was in class 6. And these were 4 women, all mothers. And they were telling me that, and this was a few years ago, they were telling me that, look, these days, by the time they're in class 3, they know almost everything because they have access to it. So you can restrict them. But you have, if they're in a good school and there are only, say, 20 or 30 people in the class, one of them finds out something in the morning. By afternoon, all the others know. So you are influencing them at home. You're setting a roadmap. You're telling them what is right, what is wrong. You're leading them to prayer. You're taking them to church. You're instilling what you believe is the right value system. But society has moved ahead and they have access to information. So it's a constant tug of war. You're doing things, you're changing the environments for them. My wife felt there were too many naughty kids in the primary school. We moved child to a boarding house. They have their own character. So they are either inclined to play or not to play. They are inclined to read or not to read. They're inclined to sports or to the internet, whatever it is. Yeah. But like my colleagues have said, it's a double-edged sword. They need to be out there as well. We may shy from social media, but they find a need to be there. And social media might be good. They may want to sort of program or learn new skills. They may choose to go into marketing or whatever. And they find their strengths. Of course, they might find their weaknesses as well, but they find their strengths. So I have my kids going in different directions. But luckily, they found strengths with new media. The child might be playful, but might be particularly good at marketing stuff, which eventually might lead them to become an entrepreneur. I mean, I find my daughter, who's 20, she plays on things like Instagram. She blogs. She does a small clip. She gets 200,000 hits. You think she's joking, but that is serious business, and she's not even taking it seriously. She hasn't even started. She's still messing around. So it's very difficult to have hard rules. I mean, we've got to accept that we're in a new era. They've got to be introduced to it. But of course, cautiously, because you know that by the same token, they could be destroyed. I mean, that is an extreme. But they may get to places that you really don't want them to be. So we've got to accept that culture, grooming, for want of the right word, because grooming can be negative, growth with respect to skill set can also be nurtured through the right use of media. But definitely you need a value system. In this house, this is what we do. This is what we do not do in this family. And they've got to understand that, and you've got to hope that with strong guidance, they will get the better things out of new media than the worst things.
I tell you, tough love cannot be what it was in the 1960s. Oh, not the cane doesn't work anymore. No. Yes, I think that we definitely. It's a digital cane. Yes, because they sometimes, and I think some people want to know that exactly how do you enforce some of these things, because, like you said, you can't control where the information is coming from. It's coming from everywhere. Privacy laws are changing, and to include children, where you go to the institutions and they won't even tell you what your child has done, because it's against the rules, But that's where we are. I have another. So we have so many questions actually from the viewers, but I think we've run out of time. So we'll have to see what the closing arguments are. Okay. I think overall we've gotten some very exciting pointers. I think that from judging from the feedback that we've had and the reviews, I think the participants and the viewers, we thank you very much for being with us. And I'll end here. Again, my name is Carl Richards. It has been a pleasure hosting today's program. I thank you all for being with us. And you can find us online at stnghana.org. That's stnghana.org. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram on Seed Transformation Network, the Ghana chapter. Thank you, and enjoy your week.